Hello everyone and welcome to the Good Old Gamer. So if you guys seen recently, I did a video testing the Nvidia driver overhead using an RTX 2080 Ti compared to the Radeon RX 6700 XT. And I decided since I had the 2080 Ti on hand, this would be a perfect time to check out the ray tracing performance of the AMD card, specifically against Nvidia's first time out with the Turing architecture. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at here today, how these two graphics cards that perform very similarly in standard rasterization performance compare in ray tracing, and see just how good or bad AMD's ray tracing really is. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. But before we get into it, videos like this are made possible by you guys. Your support by going ahead and sharing, liking, subscribing, all that stuff really does help out, and supporting directly by clicking the little join button that's down below, or doing the thanks button. That helps as well. That's brand new. Or joining over on Patreon to go ahead and support the channel. You gain Discord access to the After Hours Techonomics podcast, and you get to ask questions of Paul, myself, and any guests that we may have on the Techonomics podcast every single week. So there's plenty of benefits there, and of course you get to chat with me directly. So I want to thank you all for your support, and thank you for helping make videos like this one right here happen. Okay, so let's start with the testing methodology. On this one, what I decided to do was, because these are high-ish end graphics cards, we're going to be running at 1080p. It's ray tracing. We're not using DLSS, no FSR, no none of that stuff. We want to see the native performance because a lot of people don't like those upscaling techniques. And honestly, with the AMD card, well, it would be a bloodbath if I'm using DLSS on these titles, and AMD's got nothing. So I wanted to see as apples to apples as possible. Because of that, all the games are tested at their highest graphical settings, but ray tracing features, all of them are turned on for each game, but they're set, if they have an option, I set them to the lowest slider. So some games have the option for like high ray tracing, low ray tracing, whatever. I set that to the absolute lowest, but I made sure each and every feature was turned on. So for the test system, we're using something a little bit different this time. I'm using the Intel Core i5-11400. This is the 2021 Rocket Lake revision. This is a great CPU if you can get it for under $200. This is also, of course, paired with the MSI Mech2X RX 6700 XT 12GB and the EVGA for the Win 3 RTX 2080 Ti 11GB card. So they have similar amounts of VRAM, so I think this is a better apples to apples comparison than something even like a 3070 to the 6700 XT. For the motherboard, I'm using the ASRock H510M-ITX/AC. This is the most budget-friendly ITX board possible for this CPU. I intended this to be a living room PC for me, and honestly, it's a great little board. It does all the things, so I like it. And for the memory, I used the Kingston Fury Beast DDR4 3200 CL16 32GB kit. This is a great kit of memory, and I've been using it on all of the benchmarks so far. And that was also paired by a Kingston KC 2500 1TB NVMe PCIe Gen 3 SSD. Now, for any other specs, if you're interested, links are in the description below. If you want to check any of these parts out, feel free to do so. That also helps support the channel. All right, for this one, we're going to kick it off with a big one. We're kicking it off with Cyberpunk 2077. So the RTX 2080 Ti comes in with an average frame rate of 46 and a 1% low of 38 FPS. This is pretty weak showing, considering this is a $1,200 graphics card running 1080p. This is just how rough ray tracing is. However, compared to the 6700 XT, that comes in at 27 FPS on average, with 22 FPS on the 1% low. So, well, the 2080 Ti is actually looking pretty good in comparison. Switching on over to Metro Exodus, we have the 2080 Ti coming in with an average FPS of 105 frames per second and 1% low of 74. That's very, very solid. And the 6700 XT coming in at 75 FPS on average with a 1% low of 61. So both are good. The 2080 Ti is just way better, but both of these are actually very, very playable. The 2080 Ti would likely also be playable at something like 1440p though. The next game I tested is Control. And Control on the RTX 2080 Ti comes in with 80 FPS on average and 64 FPS on the 1% low, with the 6700 XT coming in at 56 FPS on average and 44 FPS on the 1% low. So this is definitely one game where Nvidia is just playable and AMD just really kind of isn't. And the last game I tested was Watch Dogs Legion. We have the RTX 2080 Ti coming in at 60 FPS on average with a 1% low of 51, and the 6700 XT coming in with 50 FPS on average and 40 on the 1% low. Now, I didn't do a whole lot of benchmarks here. This was just kind of like a quick test. I just wanted to see how they compared side to side, and I felt that it was interesting enough to show you guys the results that I found. And it's very clear that even Turing is significantly better at ray tracing. Now, I believe, I'm looking at my list here, I believe all of these games were NVIDIA-sponsored games, so you could say, well, maybe they're slated better, maybe they're optimized better for their hardware. That's true, but AMD waited an entire generation, and these aren't the newest games. I guess Cyberpunk and Watch Dogs are, but Control and Metro Exodus have been out for a while. So they should have had enough time to make these games work better, in my opinion. Metro Exodus being the only game that I would deem to be playable at 1080p on a 6700 XT with ray tracing enabled. That, it's just not great, boys. So number one, the big takeaway here is you shouldn't be putting on ray tracing anyway. Ray tracing does not make sense. This level of performance hit is definitely not worth the visuals. You guys saw the video footage up there. If I showed you side-by-sides with the non-ray traced version of these games, you'd be like, what's the difference? It's very difficult to tell. I could barely tell. I'm like, what the hell? Why is my frame rate so low for this shit? That's my personal takeaway. But if you're one of those people who are like, I must have this feature, it's very clear that you want to go with an Nvidia card. Now, obviously, we already knew that, but if your options are an old Turing-based GPU or even like an RX 6000 series, and you're like, well, the 6000 series is newer, I should probably go with that. Well, not if ray tracing is what you're trying to do, because realistically, you could probably get away with the 2070 Super and get the same level of ray tracing performance, if not possibly even better than the 6700 XT. So your rasterization performance might be weaker, but your ray tracing performance is better. So it's just very clear that AMD's first foray into the hardware accelerated ray tracing market is not as good as Turing. And that was really what I was trying to gauge here. Where are we at? How does this compare to NVIDIA's previous generation? And using cards of similar type performance, similar amounts of VRAM, it's just not on that level. So yes, RDNA2 can do ray tracing, but you're not going to use it unless it's an AMD sponsored title and they make sure that it runs super well. So that's a huge little caveat right there, that you have to pick just specific games that you could turn it on. Personally, just leave the stuff off, don't worry about it, and just get a crap ton more performance, because you're looking at basically RX 580 level performance at 1080p with ray tracing on like last generation's $1,200 card, and these cards are selling for $700, $800, $900 this gen, this level of performance. So there's just no point in doing it. So, alrighty guys, this isn't a super long video. I just found this interesting. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do the direct comparison since I had the GPUs on hand. I don't think anybody's too surprised by this. Most other reviewers have found this out. But comparing directly to NVIDIA's first ray tracing card to AMD's first ray tracing card, I think that that's a better comparison than Ampere to RDNA2, because Ampere is obviously a little bit more refined. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you guys even care about ray tracing? I know I personally don't, but I'm interested to hear if you guys do. Do you think in the future you might turn it on? I think most people are at the point where if they could turn it on and it doesn't kill their performance, they can still run the resolutions they want, still hit 60 plus FPS. Most people probably want it. But I'm talking about, let's say that's not a thing. You always have to drop a resolution tier down. If that's going to be the case, are you ever going to be interested in this technology? Let me know in the comment section down below. Once again, if you want to help support the channel, please smash that like button. Please share this around. Please subscribe. And that's really all I have for you guys here today. I'll catch you guys in the next video.